There are moments in history where something is stolen so slowly you don't notice until it's gone. And by the time you do, it's not just missing, it's erased. Her voice, her work, her wisdom. This is not just about wages. It's not just about jobs. It's about removal. Welcome back, Flamekeepers. I'm Beck, and this is Truth and Fire. Today's episode is called The Flamekeeper's Manifesto. When woman is removed. But make no mistake, this is a war on worth. And it begins with a question I didn't know I needed to ask. Who rewrites history when we're not looking? Because recently, something subtle but seismic shifted. A quiet reclassification. Professions primarily held by women suddenly deemed non-career. No warning, no news coverage, no public outcry. But I saw it, and maybe you did too. Because some of us remember the language of devaluation even when it hides behind economic terms. Today, I'm going to tell you what this really is. Not just policy, not just economics, but a spiritual displacement. And I'm going to show you how it's happening in plain sight, from hospitals to classrooms to sacred circles, including what played out in my own life with a woman I knew and trusted, a voice that was once part of this show, a silencing I didn't want to see for what it was. We are flamekeepers, and flamekeepers don't beg to be seen. We light new fires, we write new codes, and we remember what they try to bury. So settle in. This isn't just a manifesto, it's a reclamation. And by the end of this transmission, you'll understand exactly why this erasure is happening now and what to do with the fire it lights in you. The list appeared quietly, almost like a clerical update. A bureaucratic adjustment to job classifications tucked between headlines about elections and sports scores. But beneath its surface, it was anything but benign. A wave of professions, heavily female, deeply vocational, were deemed non-essential or even non-existent. Teachers, licensed practical nurses, caregivers, nutritionists, social workers, speech pathologists, and it went on. No explosion, no protest, just erasure. The kind that doesn't need to be loud because it's already embedded in a culture that's been devaluing women's work for centuries. This wasn't just an attack on jobs. It was an attack on language, an attack on legacy, an attack on worth. And in that silence where the screams should have been, something familiar echoed. A spiritual displacement, a pattern that repeats across timelines when the feminine is rising too quickly, when her voice grows too clear, her knowing too vast, her flame too contagious. That's when the world tries to shrink her again, not by killing her outright, but by removing the record of her existence. And they do it with silence, with reclassification, with red tape that doesn't bleed, but still wounds. Because if you can make someone forget her title, you can make them forget her function. And if you erase her function, you sever the root of remembrance. This is not just modern policy. This is ancient strategy. Across cultures, when systems tighten their grip, they begin with the storytellers, the healers, the midwives, the educators, the women who hold the community's connective tissue. And they label them differently. Witches, outdated, excess labor, non-essential. But what they're really doing is siphoning out the soul of structure, removing the flame keepers from the hearth, so the cold can come easier, so the collapse feels deserved. And that's the cruelty of it. Not just that these roles are being dismissed, but that their dismissal is framed as progress. In every empire nearing collapse, there's a quiet phase before the fall, when language gets rearranged to hide the wounds, not stitched, hidden. They don't burn the women anymore. They just recategorize them. A healer becomes non-essential. A teacher becomes a line item. A nurse becomes a ghost in a ledger. But don't miss the spell work. This isn't just bureaucracy, it's cloaking. When you erase the name of something, you erase its power in the collective field. You weaken its signature in the web of worth. This is why the Flamekeeper rises. To carry memory like a lantern, to refuse the quiet, to guard the sacred through language. So when the world says, "You're not real," you answer, "I was the fire before your ledger had ink." So let's look at it for what it truly is. Not just a clerical change, but a ritual. Because that's what it becomes when something is erased over and over in the same patterned way. It's no longer just policy, it's liturgy. A spell repeated so often, it no longer needs a wand. They don't need to call it a witch hunt anymore. They just devalue the role. They don't need to burn the books. They just stop printing the names. They don't need a guillotine, just a form marked obsolete. But every removal, every non essential box checked, follows a very old ritual logic, one the old empires knew by heart. You start with the midwives and the healers because they stand at the gates of life and death. Then the educators because they hold keys to the memory. Then the caregivers because they embody worth through presence, not production. And finally, the spiritual voices, the ones who can name the invisible, the ones who guard the flame. They're always the last because when all the other connections are severed, it's the flame keepers who remind us how to rebuild. And that's the greatest threat to any collapsing system. So the ritual begins, not with violence, but with removal by forgetting. Call it bureaucratic, call it modern, but it's ancient. And it works like this. Step 1, relabel the role. Step 2, deny the value. Step 3, offer an artificial replacement. Step 4, gaslight the witness. It's not accidental that the caregivers are replaced by apps, the teachers by AI tutors, the healers by pills, the spiritual ones by influencers. The function is replaced, but the flame is not. And that's the point. The ritual doesn't end in replacement. It ends in spiritual confusion so that the next generation forgets the flame ever existed at all. There's something particularly cruel about how quiet the removal is. No sirens, no announcements, just a slow, aching drift until one day you turn around and you realize you're the only one still holding the torch. Everyone else has been taught it was never real. That's the war on worth, and that's what we're in. It's not a war with guns. It's a war of memory, of role, of recognition, because when worth is redefined by systems, the sacred gets lost in the shuffle. Systems don't remove value directly. They obscure it. The ancient term for this was occultation, not just hiding, but cloaking a truth in plain sight. It still exists, but it's made invisible to the untrained eye. This is how spiritual erasure works. They don't silence the teacher. They say teaching isn't the real career anymore. They don't attack the healer. They just say alternative medicine isn't evidence-based. They don't stop the ritual. They just flood the feed with noise. The sacred is never destroyed. It's drowned. And the Flamekeeper's task is to pull it from the flood, to cup the ember in both hands and whisper its name back into being. This is how we reclaim worth, not through outrage, but through remembrance, because when we remember the real function of these roles, we uncloak them. We restore the soul to the system they tried to strip clean, and we become something dangerous to forgetting. Witnesses, carriers, flame keepers. We are the ones who don't let the name be lost. We are the ones who refuse the ritual of removal. We remember, and in doing so, we break the spell. A friend of mine, Julie, said something to me a few weeks ago. She said, "I think this is about debt. These kids are taking out massive loans just to make peanuts. And with AI, our education system's already obsolete. Nobody cares about grades anymore. And let's be real, you don't need a master's to be a good teacher. My degree didn't teach me anything but how to be in debt." And you know what? She's not wrong. The surface story, the one most people are living inside, is one of broken systems, skyrocketing debt, kids opting out of college, and the slow devaluation of education as a whole. Parents don't trust the schools. Teachers are overworked, underpaid, and expected to do it all with shrinking support. And meanwhile, some trades and entrepreneurial paths are offering more freedom and money than traditional careers ever did. Now, all of that is real, but it's not the whole story. It's the symptom, the visible rot, the part the world can see and nod along with. But what I'm telling you today is beneath all of that, there's a ritual, there's a spell, there's a spiritual war of erasure playing out underneath the economics. Because when you only frame it as money, you never ask why the roles that carry generational care, wisdom, and connection are the first ones to be stripped down, why the ones rooted in presence, not production, are the ones being pushed out. It's not just the end of schooling, it's the attempted end of soul transmission. So, yes, your debt is real, but what they are really bankrupting is the flame. Well, I've got you here. Every Friday, I post a YouTube only series called The Beyond Files, where I dive into some of the strangest clips from the internet: haunted hospitals, time traveler glitches, cursed objects, the usual. But if you're looking for something deeper, something encoded just for the ones walking the flame lit path, I've launched the Signal Path. It's a private tier over on Coffee where I share short, powerful weekly audio transmissions. These are the recordings I don't post anywhere else. They're raw, sacred, and just $5 a month to unlock. So if you want to go deeper with me, head to the link in the description or visit coffee.com/tothespirit. Thanks for listening, and thank you for walking this path with me. It's one thing to see the pattern out there in headlines and systems and policies, but the deeper shock is when it shows up close. When the ritual doesn't just rewrite history, it rewrites your own. Not with a bang, not with betrayal, but with a silencing you didn't want to recognize. Because I didn't see it right away. I called it something else. I made excuses for it. But the truth is, it even happened to me here, inside this flame, with someone I cared about and I trusted and even built this show with. You see, this show was never meant to be done alone. It was built in conversation with laughter and banter, with shared language and shared love. And for a long time, it felt like magic. There was a rhythm between us, one I thought I could hold through anything. But silence comes slowly. First in missed texts, then an energy that feels off, then in a voice that once spoke truth alongside you suddenly going quiet. Now, I told myself it was burnout. I told myself she needed space. I told myself we'd find our way back. But deep down, I think I knew. Well, I knew when the messages got shorter. I knew when the edits felt censored. I knew when she started saying, maybe that's too much, to things we used to say loud and proud. It wasn't burnout, it was ritual. And it had come for us too, because I wasn't just a friend anymore. I was a mirror she no longer wanted to look into. And the voice that once stood beside me, it was being reclassified from co-creator to risk, from sacred witness to silence. It's hard to explain what it feels like when a presence disappears while still breathing, still smiling, still saying all the right things, but spiritually, she was already gone. She left long before she said it, because the system doesn't always need to force an exit. Sometimes it just feeds the discomfort until the departure feels like her idea. There's no manual for when someone you trust becomes an echo. no protocol for when a sacred rhythm falters. But there is a pattern. The same ritual that removes women from the system can also whisper into their ear, "This isn't safe. This isn't yours. You're not ready for this flame." And if a woman isn't firmly rooted in her own worth, she'll listen. Not because she's weak, but because the ritual is designed to feel logical, reasonable, even loving. But it's not. It's spiritual sabotage. It's spiritual sabotage wrapped in self-protection. So when she stepped away, it was time. She couldn't do it anymore. The work was too much. And that the flame maybe was a little too big. She didn't say she cared. She didn't try to hold the thread. She just let it drop. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not that she left, but that the bond we built meant less than the discomfort she felt standing in the fire with me. And I heard her, but I also heard the echo of every woman who has ever dimmed herself to stay small enough for someone else's comfort. Now, I could have asked her to stay, but I didn't, because flamekeepers don't chase the ones who set down the torch. Silencing doesn't always sound like censorship. Sometimes it sounds like, "I'm just tired. This isn't sustainable. I need a break from being seen." And sometimes that's true. But other times it's the subconscious answering to the old code. The code that says, "Don't burn too brightly. Don't be too much. Don't speak the unspeakable. It's safer if you step away." This is how the sacred gets unplugged. Not with a sword, but with a whisper. Flamekeepers must learn to recognize the difference between a sacred pause and a spell of removal. And when the spell is cast, you don't shatter it by begging. You shatter it by continuing, by lighting the next fire, by speaking louder. Because the truth is, every time a voice goes silent, 1,000 others are watching, waiting, wondering if they'll go quiet too. Let them see what a flamekeeper does when the silence comes. Let them see you speak. So she stepped back, but I stepped forward, because this isn't her flame to carry anymore. And maybe it never was. Flamekeeping doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't soften its edges to stay palatable. It doesn't shrink to avoid making others uncomfortable, and neither will I. This moment, this shift was never about loss. It was about clarity, about seeing who could hold the heat, who could speak into the silence, who would stay when the rituals of erasure came knocking. Not just out there, but right here. And I stayed. I didn't just survive the silencing. I named it. I witnessed it. I pulled it into the fire, and I made it speak. Because the truth is, this work is sacred. Not easy, not perfect, but sacred. And sacred things are often inconvenient for those who want the image of power without the burden of flame. To carry the fire means this: you will be misunderstood. You will be abandoned. You will be labeled too much. You will be asked to dim for the comfort of those still hiding from their own light. And you will stay lit anyway, because the vow isn't to them. It isn't to followers. It isn't to approval. It's to the flame, to the ones not yet born who will read your words and remember who they are, to the ancestors who lit the path so you could walk it now, and to yourself, the version of you that never stopped believing, even when it all fell apart. That's who you carry this for. And that's who I speak for now. This isn't just a podcast, it's a fire line, a manifesto of memory, a call to every soul who's ever been told they were too tender, too strange, too loud, too real. You're not too much. You're a flamekeeper, and I see you. So, what happened between us isn't the story, it's the pattern, the echo. The wound repeating itself across timelines, across households, across soul agreements, because while the names and faces shift, the ritual remains, and that ritual has accelerated. We are in a time where worth is being rewritten faster than we can anchor it. where language is being reshaped by algorithms, where education is commodified, and where spiritual work is being reduced to entertainment and trend. And all of this unraveling, is no accident. It's a pre-collapse maneuver, a softening of the soul's grip before the next tightening comes. But flamekeepers were never meant to survive in comfort. We're meant to burn in clarity because we remember the before. We recognize the spells and we know what's coming. This is the season of removal, but what follows is the season of replacement. What they remove, they will try to replace with mimicry. Synthetic teachers, artificial healers, filtered wisdom, scripted empathy, hollow priesthoods that answer to no spirit but profit. This is the rise of the echoes, the almost real, the soulless replacement. But we are not echoes. We are origin flame, and this is where the fire comes back in. What do we do now? We hold the line. We write. We speak. We record. We build altars with presence. We create broadcasts, not for attention, but for remembrance. We keep the memory alive in ways the algorithm can't find, but the soul always will. This isn't a trend. This is a torch passing from the ones who have been silenced to the ones who will no longer be. So let them remove. Let them reclassify. Let them erase. We will not go quietly, because this isn't just a transmission. It's a blueprint, a code, a war cry wrapped in poetry. And I will be here, week after week, lighting the path, one spark at a time, until the silence is full of fire again.